Okay, I encourage members leaving the chamber to do so as quickly and as quietly as possible. Let's move on to the next item of business, which is a debate on motion 16353 in the name of Jenny Minto on improving miscarriage care. I'd invite members wishing to participate in this debate to press the request to speak buttons, and I call on Jenny Minto to speak to and move the motion around 10 minutes. Minister. Point of order, Rachel Hamilton.
Thank you to the Deputy Presiding Officer. It's just been drawn to my attention that the delivery framework for miscarriage care in Scotland and the progesterone pathway is in the motion as welcomes the publication, but members didn't have the opportunity to see this publication, Presiding Officer, until at 3:25, and certain members were sent that, business managers, etc., but not the speakers. And it's very difficult to comment on a framework and a pathway when we don't have clear information from the government in front of us, and I wanted to make you aware of that and ask to seek your advice.
Thank you, Ms Hamilton. I think it's generally accepted that as much notice as possible should be given to members, although I appreciate there will be occasions where that is more difficult than it is on others. I am not aware of the circumstances that you refer to, Ms Hamilton, but we'll certainly look into them, and if a more detailed response is required, then we'll come back to you. Minister, around 10 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. In my time as Minister for Women's Health, and indeed my life, I have heard many devastating stories from people affected by miscarriage and baby loss. The charity Tommy's said that 1 in 2 adults have experienced or know someone who has experienced miscarriage or baby loss. So I know that many people in the chamber, and indeed watching today, will have been affected, and I want to start by extending my heartfelt condolences to all those who have experienced miscarriage or baby loss. I know that pain doesn't go away, but I hope by speaking out about miscarriage and stillbirth today, we can help break the stigma associated and ensure that women and families feel empowered to find their voice and access the care and support that is right for them. And so I am pleased to bring forward a debate on this very important topic, and I hope that it serves as an opportunity to reflect on progress made and discuss the next steps for improving miscarriage care in Scotland. Today, we became the first country in the UK to publish a government delivery framework for miscarriage care since the publication of the Lancet report, a pivotal moment in the campaign for better miscarriage care alongside a new progesterone pathway. These documents will make a real difference in ensuring that those who experience miscarriage receive a good standard of care and support wherever they live in Scotland. Key to this is ensuring that women do not have to wait until a third miscarriage to receive tailored support, that they can access care in dedicated early pregnancy units or services, and that separate spaces are provided in hospitals for those who experience a pregnancy, baby loss, be that a miscarriage or stillbirth. We also remain resolute in our commitment to expand access to progesterone for women who need it. We have made progress on all these commitments, but we believe the delivery framework will be key to help drive progress and focus on areas where improvement is still required. Yes, of course.
Douglas Ross.
I'm grateful to the Minister for giving way, and I didn't want to interrupt her while she was explaining about these important documents. But the delivery framework is 54 pages long. The National Pathway for Progesterone is 13 pages long. Was there any reason why the Government couldn't share that with members in advance of this debate? An hour is not enough for us to scrutinise these documents. And clearly the Government were aware of them on Tuesday, I think, when they would have lodged their motion for this debate, which no one tried to amend because this is a consensual debate. And it would have been helpful for us to have a good debate if opposition members had the same insight as the Government.
Minister, I can give you the time back.
I thank Douglas Ross for his intervention and understand where he is coming from. I think what's important is that this is the start of a process, and I will go on to talk a bit more about the framework and the importance of it within Scotland. And I am offering to have a meeting with members that are interested in learning more about this at some point after the debate. So thank you for your intervention to allow me to say that. While the framework focuses on the first trimester miscarriage care, I want to take a moment to acknowledge women and families who go through baby loss and stillbirth at later stages. It is vital that they receive excellent care and support at such an incredibly difficult time. And I know that improvements continue to be made by NHS boards and through the Stillbirth National Bereavement Care pathway. In developing the framework, we carried out a scoping exercise across all NHS boards into the availability of services for miscarriage and unexpected pregnancy complications. While the National Scoping report sets out that all NHS boards have dedicated facilities for women experiencing unexpected pregnancy complications and services available for women experiencing miscarriage, there is variation in how these services are delivered. For example, 10 boards have a dedicated early pregnancy unit, with the rest delivering early pregnancy services within existing services. 11 boards have a separate room, ward or area away from the labour ward for women experiencing miscarriage. Boards without a separate space are aware this must be addressed as a priority and are working on providing this space. And while elements of the graded approach to miscarriage, as recommended by the Lancet report, can be accessed in 13 out of 14 boards, none consistently deliver all elements, particularly after a first or second miscarriage.
Monica Lennon.
To the Minister for giving way, and I think we'll approach this in good faith because we haven't yet read the framework. But on that point of those territorial boards who have yet to make progress, can the Minister today give a timeline as to when that work will be complete? Minister.
Monica Lennon for her intervention, and I recognise the very important work that you've done within women's health and also for your constituents. I can't give a time frame just now, but it's something that my team of officials are working very closely with NHS boards to ensure that that separate space is brought in as soon as possible. It may be due to the financing of the building of the hospital, or might be because of trying to find specific spaces, but there are a number of reasons, but we are working closely with health boards. In developing the framework, an expert miscarriage group and a writing group were established, and I'm deeply grateful to everyone involved. The expert group was co-chaired by Colin Duncan, Professor of Reproductive Medicine and Science at the University of Edinburgh, and Scotland's Chief Midwifery Officer, Professor Justine Craig, and had wide representation from across the NHS, Royal Colleges and third sector organisations. The expert group has set out timescales for delivery of the framework and its 34 deliverables and actions. I acknowledge that this is a difficult time for boards and there will be some challenges to implementation, which is why I am pleased to announce funding of £1.5 million for boards in the next financial year to support this very important work. Kath Abrahams, CEO of Tommy's National Centre for Miscarriage Research, has today described the framework as a real milestone on the path to excellent care for women in Scotland. As well as Tommy's, Held in Our Hearts, SANS and the Miscarriage Association have also been at the heart of this work, and I thank them for their crucial input. Thankfully, for most women, a first miscarriage is also their last. But that doesn't mean it isn't a devastating experience, full of questions that often just can't be answered. Why did it happen to me? Did I do something wrong? Can I help prevent it happening again? Whilst often there are no answers, we can provide women with as much information as possible. I am aware that these documents published today are dense and aimed specifically at senior management and health professionals involved in miscarriage care. However, I know from speaking to women and partners who have experienced miscarriage that there is a real need to provide more clear and accessible information to those going through it. That is why we've been working with the charity Tommy's. I would like to make some progress. That is why we have been working with the charity Tommy's and a group of professionals and third sector organisations to develop patient leaflets. There are 3 leaflets titled I Think I'm Having a Miscarriage, After a Miscarriage, Miscarriage Dads and Partners. All 3 leaflets are available digitally from today and will link to the newly published, vastly expanded and improved NHS Inform miscarriage pages. We also have a leaflet on reducing the risk of stillbirth, and a copy of this is given to every pregnant woman in Scotland. Following this publication of the framework, we will work closely with Tommy's and Held in Our Hearts to develop a patient's charter setting out clearly what care and support women are entitled to and how they can access it. I will ensure both people with lived experience and health professionals are involved in the development of the Charter. To ensure that all women and their partners receive the support and care they need, we must have a more accurate picture of the number of miscarriages happening in Scotland. We commissioned Public Health Scotland to collect this data, initially concentrating on establishing data collection for miscarriages presenting to early pregnancy units and services, and I'm pleased to announce that a data set has been agreed and that Public Health Scotland is now testing this in boards. We know that miscarriage can be devastating for partners, and they often feel a great sense of helplessness. We also know many dads and partners believe that they need to put their feelings to one side to support their partner. This is just one example of why tackling stigma is so important. We need to help break that silence that too often goes alongside miscarriage and stillbirth to ensure that everyone who needs support receives it. And I'm pleased that we in this chamber are playing our part in speaking out today. One of my first engagements as a minister was to the SANS and Scottish Government National Bereavement Care Pathways Conference. The powerful speeches and atmosphere of that event will stay with me always. There was a real warmth in the room, which may seem a strange thing to say, but it was clear that everyone there, no matter their personal circumstances, wanted to support others and share experiences to improve things for others. So we continue to work closely with SAMS, and as well as funding and supporting the development of the National Bereavement Care Pathways, we continue to fund SANS to support boards with implementation of all 5 pathways for pregnancy and baby loss. Last year, I attended a roundtable hosted by Held in Our Hearts and Bob Doris MSP to hear about the innovative Hospital to Home project. I then had the privilege of visiting their premises and chatting again with their Chief Executive, Nicola Walsh, staff members and bereaved parents, where I was pleased to confirm funding of £60,000 for both this year and the next for the project. We've also launched a memorial book of pregnancy and baby loss prior to 24 weeks, because we know that for many people, recognition of their loss provides some comfort and validation during an incredibly painful time. I've said many times before how immensely proud I am to hold the position of Minister for Public Health and Women's Health, and today, opening this important debate is no exception. I hope that in coming together today and speaking openly about miscarriage in our national parliament, we can help break down the stigma, send a message to people that they are not alone, and importantly drive improvement for those accessing miscarriage care. I move the motion in my name. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. I now call Brian Whittle, around 7 minutes. Mr Whittle.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. Can I start by reminding the Chamber that I have a daughter who is a midwife in the Scottish NHS. I am actually very grateful to have the opportunity to open this debate on behalf of the Scottish Conservatives. I think the impact of miscarriage or stillbirth has such a profound and traumatic impact, predominantly and rightly on the mother, but we also, as the Minister has recognised, there is also trauma for those around the mother supporting her through this time. And I say that, Presiding Officer, because I've been in that situation myself. And even though it was more than 30 years ago, I think the strength of those emotions took me a bit by surprise, to be honest, when they surfaced, knowing I was going to give this speech, remembering what my wife had to go through that night. And it's also a big surprise then to many when you learn how many people go through a similar experience. 1 in 4 women lose a pregnancy, Presiding Officer, along with their families and friends. And when it happens to you, you think you're the only one going through that trauma. So I think that's why, as the Minister said, that's why this debate and debates like this are so important, to be able to get that message out that there is help to be sought. And I was really glad the Minister mentioned the organisation SANS, who are doing incredible work, and there are many others along those lines. Many in the Chamber will also know of a constituent of mine, Fraser Morton, whose partner gave birth to Lucas, who was initially diagnosed as stillborn. But through a campaign that included a BBC documentary and an investigation through Healthcare Improvement Scotland, got that diagnosis changed to death during birth and managed to get his son registered on a birth certificate. Not many know that many stillborn children don't get the opportunity to have a birth certificate. I think that's something we do need to consider, because it seems to me that those that we've met before, That seems to be a really, really important anchor. And that was one of the first constituency cases I was involved in, and I have remained in contact with Fraser and his partner ever since. And as an outcome of that investigation, they managed to highlight that there was 24 neonatal staff shot at Cross House. And he and his wife, June, have campaigned and raised money for others suffering a similar loss. They are, in my view, two very special human beings. Women in Scotland are struggling to access mental health support post-miscarriage. Across all health boards, there does not appear to be a clear process in all sites that provide miscarriage care for the routine assessment or referral to support services for mental health, bereavement or counselling support. And screening for mental health issues are not provided in all health boards. In 2020, the Imperial College of London found miscarriage and ectopic pregnancy may trigger long-term post-traumatic stress, anxiety and depression. And following the publication of this research, the Miscarriage Association gathered online responses that echoed the research focused on the serious and long-term impact on mental health, with many people sharing personal experiences around the gap between the needs and the services and support available. Key issues mentioned were not exclusive to Scotland, but if you know anyone who has confided in you about their miscarriage experience, their comments will not be surprising. Lack of support at the time of loss and later on, lack of recognition of pregnancy loss as a significant event, including language used by medical staff. Women experience loss being seen in the same place as expectant mothers or those who have given birth. High levels of anxiety when thinking about another pregnancy and during any future pregnancies, and little access to or even mention of counselling or other therapies, and often long waiting lists if they were referred. When looking at the impact of miscarriage holistically, we need to recognise that the woman's partner and families are often the first line of support to that woman, but all too often they are also people that feel the loss of the pregnancy deeply too. So making sure that partners and families get the right support means that they will be able to process that trauma and support the woman in their lives as she processes her own trauma. Though all of this is recognised through current NHS pathways, there is a lack of bespoke support for partners, especially men, and families to help them process the distinctly different emotions. And that brings me to healthcare professionals. And without the staff, the delivery framework for miscarriage care in Scotland and the progesterone pathway cannot be brought forward. It is important to look after our staff too, mentally, and through making sure that they are properly resourced. Properly resourcing does not only mean they have the tools for the job, but also the proper facilities, educational support and staffing to do that job effectively. The Scottish Government Programme for Government 2023-24, the SNP promised to improve care and support for miscarriages, including secure separate spaces in hospitals within maternity wards for women who suffer a miscarriage. Yet the recent report from the Royal College of Nursing, including eye-opening accounts about the lack of privacy and dignity for patients, where nurses have been left with no choice but to discuss miscarriages with couples in hospital corridors. Midwives, in specific, are often the first line of support for women experiencing miscarriage. However, the Royal College of Midwives has said they simply don't have the time or education to provide high-quality, evidence-based and compassionate miscarriage care. The RCM advocate, and I quote here, for access to high-quality, evidence-based and compassionate miscarriage care. However, we also need the workforce with the time and the education to provide this support. While we welcome that there is work updated the predicated absence allowance, currently it is not adequate to meet the core mandatory training and the gap in speciality midwives to ensure women and families receive the care and aftercare they need. This includes the key role of the midwives in supporting perinatal mental health for women with miscarriage. The emotional toll of miscarriage can affect a person's mental health and their approach to future pregnancies, including their willingness to access care. So it's important that women receive the right support from the very first miscarriage, both for mental and physical health, so there is no loss of trust in their medical professionals. And I know there is a persistent and serious issue in the delivery of rural health care, let alone miscarriage support, which I know my colleague Douglas Ross will touch on in more detail. But just to touch things like time to travel to access maternity services, mental health services, access to transport to get there. Telehealth may not always be the most appropriate way to deliver this care, and that shortage of mental health professionals in rural health wards. I think the stigma around mental health can be more pronounced in rural communities, increasing the isolation these women and families feel after miscarriage. So, Presiding Officer, this debate is very welcome, and I thank the Scottish Government for giving it the time. I think we'll agree that we all would like to make it. We all understand the suffering and the trauma of miscarriage and stillbirth, but the evidence is clear, Presiding Officer, that still falls short, well short of where we need to be. And I look forward to getting the opportunity to read through the document produced by the Scottish Government. Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer.
Thank you, Mr Whittle. I now call on Cara Mochan to open on behalf of Scottish Labour. Up to 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. And I am pleased to open this debate to discuss an issue that touches the lives of many families across Scotland. It is vital that we look at what more can be done to improve miscarriage and stillbirth care so that the next generation do not suffer the same dismissal that perhaps many women suffered before. Can I thank the Minister and her officials for the collective way that they formed this motion? We all want to support and progress this issue to ensure that care women receive only improves over the coming years. At this stage, I welcome the report, of course, but I'm sure the Minister will expect that there will be scrutiny from the party in terms of how we deliver this, because I think it is fair to say that some of the elements of this care is delayed and we do need to treat it with some urgency. Let me, like other members before, first acknowledge the deep emotional toll that miscarriage and stillbirth takes on individuals and, of course, their families. It is a grief that is often unspoken, and it is crucial that we recognise the profound impact it has on the many women and families who sadly require access to these kinds of services. Although hopefully reduced, let's not forget that stigma, as others have mentioned, around miscarriage still persists. In order to address that, we here in this place must do our part to talk about it, as the Minister and Brian Whittle said, and allow us to work out a way to rectify and improve the care pathway for women who have to travel that. So I do thank all the members here today for staying in for this debate and speaking in the Chamber this afternoon. I would like to express my gratitude to all of the NHS staff. Of course, we know that the kindness and expertise of our staff is the heart of our NHS, and I'm sure, like me, other members across the chamber hear from patients time and time again about the care they receive within the NHS. And in the brief look that I've had at the document, I do see actions around supporting the staff, and that is extremely welcome. My party welcome the recommendations from the Lancet Miscarriage Matters series and support the staff who have continued to work on improving miscarriage care across Scotland from that. And we welcome the progesterone pathway, and we of course support the graded model of care. We must ensure the delivery framework for miscarriage care in Scotland can be fully implemented across all NHS health boards to improve this pathway for women. And I do see those goals within the framework. But what we do know from the scoping exercise that not all NHS boards did routinely or equitably, even across their own board, have the same service for patients, and I think that's a very important point. So I do ask the Minister, perhaps in closing speech, if we could get some idea of how this might be monitored now so that we can progress it and keep quite a tight look at this framework as we go forward. Every case of miscarriage and stillbirth is a devastating tragedy for both the parents and the wider family. We know that there are many unfair and avoidable inequalities faced when attempting to access health services due to financial and, of course, geographic differences. And this can significantly impact on pregnancy and infant mortality. And I believe inequalities are a barrier for so many families, and it is our responsibility to ensure services recognise this and have firm policies in place to ensure all services are provided with this in mind. And I'll be seeking to have a look at the framework with this. We know people from our poorest communities do not readily access services or access services much later than more affluent families, so addressing this must be part of any government strategy. The disparity in geography remains far too prevalent. I don't think it's unfair of me to say this. We do talk about this in the Chamber, and I'm sure other members will recognise this about journeys that patients have to make. In Scotland, we have pockets of extreme rurality, and we must seek to workforce plan and have the skills available to attend women rather than the other way round. And again, I'll be looking at the framework to see how we make sure that's embedded in what we do. I'm very aware of time. I just want to touch on the devastating psychological impact, as Brian Whittle has, around miscarriage for women and their wider family, and that psychological services should be available to make sure people have that care right through afterwards. People will have perhaps seen the agenda briefing, which highlighted over the COVID period that those services were just not available, and that really did affect people. And there was definitely a link with women not having their family support around them at that time. And so should there be any time in the future that we need to think about how we provide services, it is absolutely clear that women require that support. I wanted also to touch on the space that women have, but I don't have a lot of time left. But I know my colleague Monica Lynn has done so much work in this, we'll possibly touch on it. But I want to thank everybody again for coming along and speaking in this debate. Thank you very much, Presiding Officer.
Thank you, Ms Morgan. I now call on Gillian Mackay to open on behalf of the Scottish Greens. Up to 4 minutes, please.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. I want to begin, as others have, by acknowledging the deep and often unspoken grief that miscarriage and stillbirth bring to women and their families, and to thank midwives and their teams across Scotland. Despite being a relatively common experience, miscarriage can be profoundly isolating, especially for those without the support they need. The emotional, physical and psychological toll can be immense, yet too often those affected suffer in silence. There is a reluctance from many to talk about their loss, especially when that loss is early. I'm sure many have spoken to family and friends who have had a throwaway comment like, "at least it was early," which definitely stops people from truly being able to speak about their loss. Good miscarriage care goes beyond medical treatment. It requires compassion, clear information and a shift in societal attitudes to ensure that no one faces this experience alone. Today, I welcome the opportunity to discuss what Scotland is doing well and what we must do better to improve care and support for those affected, and I want to thank the Minister for bringing forward this debate to the Chamber. Scotland has taken important steps in improving miscarriage care, recognising that compassionate support is just as vital as clinical treatment. For example, the National Bereavement Care Pathway has provided much-needed guidance to healthcare professionals, helping ensure that those experiencing pregnancy loss receive sensitive and appropriate care. This initiative has encouraged a more standardised approach in reducing disparities in how miscarriage care is delivered across the country. The pathways have been developed together with several pregnancy and baby loss charities and royal colleges, a wide range of healthcare experts and an advisory group of women and men who have experienced loss. The funding by the Scottish Government is vital, and it's delivered in partnership with SANS, who have already been mentioned. The important role that SANS plays in supporting families affected by miscarriage and baby loss cannot be understated. In my Central Scotland region, for instance, their local support covers groups that cover Forth Valley and Lanarkshire Health Boards, provide a safe and understanding space for bereaved parents to share their experiences and receive comfort from those who truly understand their grief. These groups, run by dedicated volunteers, offer peer support meetings, remembrance events and advice to help families navigate the tricky situations they're in. The presence of such compassionate support networks is invaluable in ensuring no one feels alone in their grief. Whilst it's undoubtable that progress has and continues to be made, there's still much work to do. Too many women report feeling dismissed or unsupported when experiencing miscarriage, particularly in early pregnancy. We must do more to ensure that healthcare professionals receive adequate training to provide that informed care. Access to miscarriage support remains inconsistent across Scotland. In some areas, women are left waiting for treatment or forced to navigate a fragmented system. Steps have been taken to mitigate this, but we must double down on efforts to ensure that every woman, regardless of where she lives, can access timely and comprehensive care. Additionally, the psychological impact, as already been mentioned, cannot be overstated. While some support services exist, many women and families struggle to find the counselling and mental health support they need. We must strengthen links between miscarriage care and mental health services. Without accurate and comprehensive data, it is difficult to identify gaps in care, and I recognise what the Minister has already said on some of that. I also believe that we must continue to listen to those with lived experience and ensure that their experiences shape these improvements. In conclusion, Presiding Officer, while we've made significant strides in supporting those affected by miscarriage and stillbirth, this effort is far from over. It is imperative that we continue to work collectively with healthcare providers, policymakers, employers and society at large to break the stigma surrounding pregnancy loss. It's only by ensuring access to consistent, compassionate and high-quality care that we can provide solace to those families who grieve.
Thank you, Ms Mackay. I now call on Beatrice Wishart to open on behalf of the Scottish Liberal Democrats. Up to 4 minutes, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Presiding Officer. I'm grateful for the opportunity to take part in this debate this afternoon on behalf of Scottish Liberal Democrats, and grateful too for the time that the Parliament has been given to discuss this important topic. I would like to associate myself with the condolences extended by the Minister and in the motion, which we will be supporting this afternoon. In June 2021, during Women's Health debate, I put in an amendment at the time, but it wasn't selected for debate, which raised the question of dedicated facilities for perinatal loss. Former Shetland resident Louise Caldwell, who I think is in Parliament this afternoon, has bravely campaigned on the issue after her miscarriage experience, when she was required to deliver on a labour ward. As I indicated in 2021, it's very difficult to imagine how hard that must be, where you're met with newborn baby photos on walls, thank you cards and baby cries and proud partners. Official guidance says that separate facilities should be provided, but women's experience shows that recognition of the issue does not always translate into reality. Since that time, there has been improvement, due in no small part to Louise's campaign. Last November in Shetland, the Northern Star Bereavement Suite at the Gilbert Bain Hospital marked its first anniversary. The suite is designed for parents who have suffered an early pregnancy loss, such as miscarriage or ectopic pregnancy. It was co-designed with the NHS team in Shetland and the baby loss charity SANS, and I pay tribute to all involved in making the suite a reality. Feedback from patients has reportedly been very positive, despite the circumstances of using the service. And families have found comfort in placing their babies' names on the memorial ward. Shetland SANS also played a key part in developing a private space in Shetland's Sombra Airport for those who are required to travel to Aberdeen on commercial flights when there are complications with their pregnancy. I don't think people actually understand how difficult it must be when you're in a small community and you're travelling and you're in the departure lounge. Yeah.
Cabinet Secretary.
I thank Beatrice Wishart for raising the facility that is in the Gilbert Bain. When I was in Shetland last year, I was able to see it, and I think it's important not just for patients but also for the staff, and I was hearing very directly that having that separate space is important for patients and for staff to be able to make sure that those mothers and families are treated with dignity and compassion at the most difficult time in all of our lives.
Beatrice Wishart.
Thank you. I thank the Health Cabinet Secretary for that intervention, and I think that's absolutely true. It is important for staff as well. I was going to go on to mention the difficulty for women who have to travel to Aberdeen, and it's being in a small community when you hear from other people coming up and asking you if you're going on holiday or whatever. And so having that private space, and I pay tribute to Hayal, who engaged with that request for that private space. And nothing can take away the mix of emotions present, but anything to help blunt the sharp edges is worthwhile. We should also consider what can be done for those living in the far north of Scotland, where there's a lot of travel involved to access women's health care. But across the UK, the National Bereavement Care Pathway is implemented with varying degrees of success, though across Scotland, care in this area is considered ahead of the rest of the UK. And we don't have to look far for a model of what is considered to be excellent for mental health support. NHS Tayside's mental health package for those experiencing baby loss includes self-referral, open-ended care and support for both parents. To help improve services, we need a better understanding of the number of miscarriages, and work is well underway to establish routine miscarriage data collection in the maternity setting. So while separate work is underway to secure access to data, held in primary care for national analysis. And once we have a better understanding of the number of miscarriages, the Sands charity calls for annual reporting on miscarriage rates to enable the government to monitor whether rates are decreasing or increasing, and that will help to introduce an outcome-based target to reduce the miscarriage rate. To conclude, Presiding Officer, I take comfort in the knowledge that in Shetland right now there's a memorial wall reflecting the unforgotten in a suite named after the constant shining light in the night sky of the Northern Star, well famed for its guidance. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Wishart. We now move to the open debate. I call Fulton McGregor to be followed by Sue Webber. Mr McGregor.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Today's debate concerns a very difficult topic, which of course is that of miscarriages, stillbirths and pregnancy losses. And I know that the Scottish Government is committed to reducing stigma, breaking the silence and normalising conversations around pregnancy loss, which in small part can be realised by having debates such as these today. Although it's hard to get exact figures, as the Minister's touched on already, it is believed that anywhere between 8 to 24% of pregnancies end in miscarriages. And in the spirit of being open and breaking down that silence, as I've, I think, said in the Chamber before, myself and my partner have experienced several miscarriages ourselves. We've got 3 lovely children, but we've had miscarriages at various points in that journey as well. And I think that the uncertainty that stems from many miscarriages going unsupported, with some women even unaware that they were pregnant in the first place. But whatever the true figures may be, each pregnancy loss has a devastating impact on those who suffer from a miscarriage, as well as their wider family and friends. And this traumatic experience requires improved supportive care, which is conducted with dignity and respect. I do appreciate the tone of today's motion, and I think that's highlighted by the fact there's not any amendments in, which acknowledges that there has been progress on the issue, but there is, of course, still much to be done. Taking forward the findings of the Lancet report and supporting the development of individualised care plans after a woman's first miscarriage, ensuring women's services and health boards have dedicated facilities for women who are experiencing unexpected pregnancy complications, and even committing to introducing 3 days of paid leave for those families who suffer miscarriages and stillbirths, are all steps in the right direction. And while I commend the work of the Scottish Government, I must also highlight the incredible work done out with the public sector, with charities such as Baby Loss Retreat, whose CEO and founder is a constituent of mine. Baby Loss Retreat was founded in February 2018 by Julie and Brian Morrison, who lost their daughter Erin in 2003. And what began as a charity that offered bereaved parents a retreat free of charge has now grown into an organisation that also provides counselling, trauma therapy and listening music therapy for siblings affected by loss. They utilise bereavement counsellors and also hold regular support groups for those who avail of their services. And I know that the other Central Scotland MSPs are very much aware of their work as well. And the co-founder, Brian Morrison, also does a lot of work on men who experience the baby loss as well, because I think that's been touched on by a couple of speakers already, and he does fantastic work on that, and I would encourage him in the room to listen to some of the videos and such like that he's done as well. And although, as I say, I'm aware of the significant progress that the Government have made in this issue, there are still areas that need urgent attention. I spoke to Gillian Morrison from Baby Loss Retreat ahead of this debate, and she stressed the need for improved services in early miscarriage units. She made me aware of a case which I have been given permission to share, and I will share it in Julie's own words, as I think that might be more apt for this situation. So, quote, "I had to deal with a parent 2 weeks ago who had experienced a miscarriage. She was sent to A&E due to early miscarriage unit being closed over the weekend, depending on what area you live in. She went to A&E bleeding and scared that she was losing her baby. She arrived in A&E and had to wait 8 hours for a gynaecologist to come and see her. For him to tell her that she may be experiencing a miscarriage, to go home and go back to the early miscarriage unit on the Wednesday to confirm if the baby heart had stopped or if she had a miscarriage. She messaged me being Joy, scared, as the bleeding was getting heavier, and she was told to wait until Wednesday, when the unit would be opened. She eventually had to pay for a private scan to confirm that she was actually having twins and that one twin had died." End quote. This is, of course, a very tragic set of circumstances, and my condolences go out to the family, but I do think it is important to raise it. And so the question from Baby Loss Retreat that they've asked me to raise here in this debate is, why are parents who are experiencing a miscarriage being sent to A&E when we have early miscarriage units that are functional for anyone experiencing a loss at an early stage? And of course, if people are experiencing pregnancy loss, if they could be diverted away from the traumatic experience of attending A&E, it would also have the double benefit of lessening the pressures on A&E as well. In conclusion, Presiding Officer, I am heartened by the steps outlined by the Scottish Government today in looking to improve miscarriage care. We need to let people know that they are not alone and that conversations like the ones today are necessary for normalising discussions around pregnancy loss. The work outlined by the Scottish Government is complemented by excellent charities and third sector organisations who have done so much for bereaved parents throughout Scotland. Nevertheless, we must continue to increase healthcare funding so that those who need it most are treated with dignity and respect. We need to invest in particular in early miscarriage units so that there is constant support when it is needed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr McGregor. I now call Sue Webber to be followed by Ronan Mackay. Ms Webber.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. In 2022, I was a member of the Health, Social Care and Sport Committee while it took evidence during their inquiry into perinatal mental health. So I do welcome the chance to speak in this debate this afternoon. And I was grateful at the time that the inquiry accounted for the impact of baby loss, which is often, as we've heard, a taboo subject and not spoken about until it affects us personally or those closest to us. Miscarriage and stillbirth can and does have a devastating impact on women and their families. It's an important issue, and I would like to extend my condolences to all of those who have been impacted. As we've heard today, miscarriage care in Scotland still faces serious challenges. Women in Scotland are struggling to access mental health support post-miscarriage, and across all health boards there appears to be no clear process that provides miscarriage care, a routine assessment or referral to support services for mental health, bereavement or counselling support. In 2023, the Scottish Government published the Miscarriage Care and Facilities in Scotland Scoping Report National Overview, which evaluated miscarriage services across Scotland. And that report acknowledged that not all health boards have a separate room for women who are miscarrying, and 4 health board areas lacked dedicated early pregnancy units, forcing women to seek care in general emergency departments, where specialised miscarriage support may not be available. And furthermore, training and skills of healthcare staff providing miscarriage does vary across health boards. Specialist training is often centralised within 1 or 2 units within a health board. And as we know, sadly, under the SNP, the workforce planning always takes a back seat. So take this from a midwife responding to a survey from the Royal College of Midwives, who said, "I cannot remember the last time we had a safe staffing within our unit. On a daily basis, we are struggling to provide a decent standard of care to our women and their families." But staff shortages are not just impacting on recruitment and retention, but also on training, which is too often failing to take place because of staff shortages. And these inconsistencies across the different health boards in Scotland need to be fixed. And the report that's been embargoed until this debate took place references key actions needed, and they've been classified as N, meaning now, that need to be addressed within 6 months, S, short term, between 12 and 15 months, and M, medium term, between 15 and 24 months. And N, there's 18 of these that have been classified as needing looked at within 16 months, from bereavement care to what happens to women after 3 miscarriages. But I want to draw your attention to number 27, where it says that 3D ultrasound is not available. Where it's not available, 2D ultrasound should be offered after a 3rd miscarriage. Where any abnormality is suspected, further imaging with 3D ultrasound at a different site or with an agreement with another NHS board or MRI should be offered. So I really hope that these 18 immediate things that need to be resourced have resources that go with them, because we will never make the change needed if there is not money there to make things fixed. In terms of the short term, 12 to 15 months, there are 10, which includes out-of-hours access to sport, which I heard members discuss in previous contributions. And the medium term, 15 to 24 months, is a series of steps, includes a series of steps what happens when a woman has a second miscarriage. The resources must follow these, and I hope the Minister will provide us with this dashboard, but at a health board level, so we can see how every single health board is stepping up to the mark to deliver on this new framework. And I am glad that we have got now the progesterone pathway. It's nothing new, and I do not understand why it's not been made available to us until today. After all, it did come in a nice guidance that was first published in 2019 and revised in 2023. And it stated that offering vaginal micronized progesterone 400 milligrams twice daily, where a woman has an intrauterine pregnancy confirmed by scan if they have had vaginal bleeding and have previously had a miscarriage. And there's nothing new in what you've presented to us this afternoon, Minister. I do not understand why we could not have had sight of it, so we could have really discussed this and celebrated something that we might be looking forward to making Scotland best in class. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Webber, and always through the chair. I call Rona Mackay to be followed by Monica Lennon. Ms Mackay.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can I just say I thought that was a very disappointing tone in Sue Webber's contribution there. Today in the Chamber we're debating an emotive, heartbreaking issue, but sadly it is very common. No, I've just started, thank you. The loss of a baby at any stage is tragic. It's a traumatic experience that can have a profound impact on families. From the elation of being pregnant and the happiness that comes from planning to welcome another life into the world and to enhance your family, to suffering devastating heartache and disappointment. Miscarriage is the loss of a pregnancy before viability, currently defined as 23 weeks and 6 days gestation or earlier. It may occur spontaneously or as a miscarriage, which may require medical or surgical management. It affects around 8 to 24% of pregnancies, although that is difficult to obtain an accurate figure because it can often occur before a woman knows she is pregnant. But throughout it all, the Scottish Government expects all women receiving maternity care to be treated with dignity and respect. We've made clear progress on maternity care in the last 5 years and we are committed to progressing this further. In 2023, we launched a memorial book and certificate for those who have experienced pregnancy or baby loss prior to 24 weeks. Many hospitals already have separate spaces for women who suffer pregnancy or baby loss, and the Scottish Government will ensure that all major hospitals and NHS boards with maternity units have this. This is a simple but humane and necessary measure to ease the pain of baby loss. Presiding Officer, it's been mentioned by other speakers, breaking the silence and reducing the stigma and isolation associated with pregnancy loss and baby death is of the utmost importance. For too long, and certainly for my generation, it was an unspoken trauma, almost secretively guarded by families as they attempted to cope with their grief. People were often told by doctors, at least it proves you can get pregnant. Try again and everything will be fine. While this may be true, it gives no comfort to grieving parents at the time of such a tragic loss. The Scottish Government believes that by delivering good quality, supportive and compassionate miscarriage and bereavement care, we can break the stigma and begin normalising conversations about miscarriage and stillbirth. Our government-funded National Bereavement Care Pathway for Pregnancy and Baby Loss and accompanying care standards are clear that women and families experiencing pregnancy or baby loss should be treated compassionately and difficult news should be delivered in quiet, private space. We fully support taking forward the findings of the Lancet report and supporting the development of individualised care plans after a woman's first miscarriage. And it also includes ensuring women's services and health boards have dedicated facilities for women who are experiencing unexpected pregnancy complications. The SNP is also committed to emulating the New Zealand, where families who experience miscarriage or stillbirth are entitled to 3 days of paid leave by delivering this within the public sector. Presiding Officer, as we've heard, the delivery framework for miscarriage care ensures that work is improved, updated and standardises and gives an end to the variation in care and support delivered across Scotland for women and families experiencing miscarriage and pregnancy loss. The framework will outline a plan for the introduction of a graded model of miscarriage care in Scotland, and it's been developed by an expert short life working group and included representations from health professionals and third sector organisations. So in conclusion, Presiding Officer, there is an abundance of support organisations out there, thankfully, such as SANS, the Miscarriage Matters, and I hope grieving families will take comfort from knowing that they can get help to get through it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Mackay. I now call Monica Lennon, who will have up to 5 minutes, further to the way in which Labour have sought to allocate their speaking time today, to be followed by Bob Doris. Ms Lennon.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I welcome the opportunity to speak in this important debate, and I'm therefore grateful to the Minister for bringing the motion to the Parliament and associate myself with her remarks in terms of sympathies to all affected and our collective efforts to smash the stigma. And I think it's really good to see the Cabinet Secretary also in the chamber today. I think that hopefully gives an indication of how important this is to the government. And I think we all recognise that for generations, miscarriage, stillbirth, baby loss, women's health has just not been high on the agenda for policymakers or governments anywhere. So the issues that we're debating today, they're certainly not unique to Scotland, but we all have a responsibility to right this injustice, and that's why this debate is so important today. I'm fortunate that I don't have the lived experience that many people have shared today, and I'm really grateful to hear from colleagues about their own experiences. So I'm fortunate, and that's why, as an MSP, I rely on my constituents to tell me about their experiences, and it's a great privilege when they feel that they can open up and can trust me with their trauma and their loss. And Beatrice Wishart's given an excellent contribution today in the chamber, and I'm really glad she was able to take part. I know that she's claiming Louise Caldwell as a Shetlander, as she was briefly, but I want to say thank you to Beatrice Wishart for her genuine support and compassion for Louise Caldwell, who is one of my constituents in Central Scotland. Louise and her husband Craig are from East Kilbride, and they are in the gallery today. And I can see true to form, they're at the very back of the chamber of the gallery, because Louise is incredibly modest about the campaigning work that she has led. And the word I often use to describe Louise is change maker. I know she'll be blushing right now, but it's thoroughly deserved, and in fact the Sunday Mail gave her an award to that effect, which I'll maybe come on to speak about. But Louise doesn't want to be in this position. She is a campaigner because she has lived this experience. She knows what it is to experience miscarriage and to have to find yourself in the general labour wards in your local maternity hospital and to have an absolute nightmare situation. And it's that juxtaposition of the balloons, the cards, the elated parents, the newborn babies, and mothers and partners and dads and other family members who are in utter shock and disbelief and just in so much pain. So when Louise came to me for help, of course I was going to listen and do whatever I could. So it's been a privilege to help Louise to have a platform here in the Scottish Parliament. Louise came to the cross-party group on women's health and shared her experience. And I'm really glad that she was able to do that. This is the first time Louise and Craig have ever been in the Scottish Parliament, but I hope it just reinforces the importance of the members not just coming here to talk amongst ourselves, but really to open up this Parliament so that the people of Scotland can feel seen and heard, and they're actually influencing the policies that we're seeing today, where investment goes, and actually making that change happen. I mean, it's no mean feat. Louise Caldwell was crowned the Sunday Mail's Community Champion in 2022. That's a national recognition. So whether you're representing Shetland or Central Scotland or the borders or anywhere in between, these issues that we're debating today, they affect every corner of Scotland. And at the time, the Sunday Mail editor said, "Extraordinary people rarely think they have done anything out of the ordinary. The courage, dedication and sheer determination of these unsung heroes make them Scotland's champions." And that was a direct reference to Louise Caldwell. A couple other things I want to mention. I know I'm running out of seconds here. I'm really grateful that the government did include recognition of stillbirth. An example that I want to briefly share, I know Tess White's not in the chamber, but Tess White and I went with other campaigners to Butte House in the summer to talk about the impact of stillbirth and to get the PLGF tests, which helps identify the risk of preeclampsia. I was there with my really good friend Lindsay Hamilton, her husband Bradley, because of the loss of their baby Caris. The outcome we got after that meeting shows that we can be a listening Parliament, government can be a listening government, But we rely on the courage of those change makers like Louise Caldwell, like Lindsay Hamilton, to put the pressure on us to make sure that we step up. So I did ask the Minister for that update on these dedicated baby loss facilities. There is more work to do, and Scottish Labour is entirely committed to playing our part to make sure the words that we share today do turn into action.
Thank you, Ms Lennon. I now call Bob Doris to be followed by Douglas Ross. Up to 4 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I took part in a similar debate on miscarriage in October 2020, led by Shona Robertson, if I recall. I said at the time that myself and my wife Janet had 4 miscarriages over the years, but that we were absolutely blessed to have Cameron in our lives, at that time our 4-year-old son. As I speak in today's debate, we are also incredibly lucky now to have a beautiful young daughter, Isla, who is 3. Cameron is now 9. My contribution in this short debate, drawing on part on our family experience, is tempered by the reality that despite the heartache and trauma we went through, 2 beautiful and joyous children is now our lived reality. Others go through the pain and heartache of recurrent miscarriage and may never be as fortunate as we have been. Today's debate must ask the question, have matters improved for miscarriage care since 2020 then? I am pleased that there has clearly been progress, but sometimes we need to take a step back and comprehend what that actually means in practice. For instance, key recommendations over the years has been for dedicated facilities for women experiencing unexpected pregnancy complications. It is positive that this happens increasingly in boards across Scotland, with most providing early pregnancy units. Whilst this is incredibly welcome, in my experience such facilities, and understand why, are often co-located or close proximity to the maternity units. The emotional impact of that can be quite profound. Imagine heading to an early pregnancy clinic expecting not to find a heartbeat, anticipating that yet another pregnancy will not progress, because you don't get excited. You never get excited with a pregnancy when you have recurrent miscarriage. You're just anxious the entire time. You're using the same shared space as mums-to-be who are almost full term, or family members of new mums excited to see a new baby on what is one of the most happiest moments of a family's life. They should be happy, they should be excited, and they should share that joy with anyone and in any way they so wish. Absolutely. However, the impact on those on the way to have the most devastating news passed to them, that yet again they won't see the birth of a child that they so desperately want, or to undergo a related clinical procedure, can be profoundly traumatic. The thoughts people have at that time are not always rational, but they're very real. So we'd have to think more about not just dedicated facilities, but the geography and the co-location of facilities also. I think that's important. I want to go on to look at the emotional support available to mum and families. Again, I can see there's been progress, such as NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde, who I know to have bereavement midwives and strong referral processes to valued partners. And indeed, a Glasgow midwife, Caroline Judge, I noticed, won the prestigious Mariposa Award for the quality of service on offer. However, I suspect what often happens across Scotland, or in some parts of Scotland anyway, is making information available and signposting, or a soft referral process, when mum and dad are numb, not receptive, or just unable to engage with such support. I have no idea what support myself and Janet were offered. It was a chaotic blur. That is why I've been championing Held in Our Hearts hospital-to-home model. Trained people, often with lived experience, reaching out to families in their homes, not just at the point of crisis, but later, when that chaotic blur has died down, when perhaps mums may most need that support and be the most receptive to it. I will certainly engage further with Dr Mary Rose Davey, who's leading miscarriage care in Greater Glasgow and Clyde, to see how they are getting on with the kind of support that I believe is needed. In the tiny amount of time that I have left, Presiding Officer, I would have said more about graded miscarriage support. I would have said more about links to assisted conception services, and the links or the lack of reliable information. For example, natural killer cells. Does that cause miscarriages? Discuss, please, because when you are a victim of recurrent miscarriage, you go through that internet forensically to work out why. No one knows why, and we need more research. Thank you, Presiding Officer.
Thank you, Mr Doris. I now call Douglas Ross, followed by Jackington Bar. Up to 4 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. I think this has been a very good, constructive and important debate, and I want to echo the way the Minister opened this debate and other speakers in sending my condolences and sympathies to every family who has gone through a miscarriage, and also thanks to the likes of Louise and Craig Caldwell, who in those moments of adversity deal with their own trauma but want to improve things for others, and it's great that they're able to join us in the chamber today. My own health board area, NHS Grampian, was one of the health boards that took part in the National Bereavement Care Pathway pilot. There's a lot of work being done in our local hospital at Dr Gray's, which I'll come on to in a moment. And Fulton McGregor was right to say it's difficult to get precise numbers on this. But I remember reading a document a couple of years ago that NHS Grampian believes they helped 15 to 20 women going through a stillbirth, 50 to 60 women experiencing loss after 13 weeks but before 24 weeks, and approximately 1,000 going through a miscarriage. So in a rural area which is not as densely populated as other health boards in the country, that is a significant number of women and families who have to experience this on an annual basis. Every year we are seeing these numbers, and it's right that we take time in our Parliament to discuss these important issues. And Gillian Mackay and others were right to speak about stigma, and Gillian Mackay made the point that some people say, oh, well, at least it happened early. And I think part of that is the fault with men, because sometimes, and I know, men don't speak about their own health very much, and certainly not their wife or their partner's health. And sometimes they think comments like that can actually be helpful. But because they've not shared experience with others, because we've not broken down the stigma, they actually add to the pain and suffering of their loved ones when they're actually simply trying to help out. Brian Whittle suggested I would mention rural healthcare, and I will, because this is an issue that affects women in every part of the country and their families. And I won't rehearse the comments that have been made about the late notice we got for the report, because I haven't read all 53 pages, but I did do a search of the document, and rural and islands is only mentioned in one paragraph of that 53-page report, and it states that the model of care within rural and island services will be different. And we all know that. So I hope in the offer of the meeting that the Minister has given to this chamber, there will be a discussion, because I know in her own constituency, representing rural and island communities, and the Cabinet Secretary has said repeatedly, with his own experience in Orkney and their fellow Minister Marie Todd, they do represent rural and island areas. This is something I think we will need to tease out more, how the recommendations of this report will affect people right across Scotland, because there were 34 recommendations or key actions, and rural and islands is not mentioned in any of the key actions. We know we will have to do something slightly different, as Beatrice Wishart said in an excellent speech. The circumstances in our island communities are very different from those in our urban communities, and I think we have to recognise that. I want to conclude, Presiding Officer, by saying it is right that we focus on the women and the family and families affected by this every single time. But we also, and I know members have and will continue to do, praise the staff for the incredible work they do in such difficult circumstances. I read a comment from Marcia Dean, who was a bereavement midwife in Dr Gray's a couple of years ago, and she said, and these are her words, "I'll always remember one mum saying, you're the midwife no one wants to meet, but I'm really glad I did." And that just shows in the darkest moments for a mum-to-be and a family, they are getting support from those specialist midwives who provide support and care in the immediate moment of a miscarriage or a stillbirth. And sometimes that care continues for months and years. And it's right that we recognise that incredible work of our NHS staff as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Ross. And I now call Jackie Dunbar. Up to 4 minutes, please, Ms Dunbar.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I welcome the Scottish Government bringing forward this important debate. So many here in the Parliament and watching at home have experienced the loss of a baby. In Scotland, we pride ourselves in being a contemporary and open-minded society, but for many, discussing the topic of loss can still feel somewhat off-limits, and we can still feel inhibited in being open about how we feel and the true impact that a miscarriage may be having. For those trying to comfort the bereaved, the words to express our sympathy often does not come easy, because at the end of the day, if we are honest, no words can help. but the sentiment felt can make all the difference. So reach out. If you can't find the words, then just hold their hand, or them. Just letting folk know you care and are thinking about them can help a little. This is a bittersweet debate, knowing that while the data tells us that miscarriage is a relatively common occurrence, nonetheless the loss of a baby, no matter what stage of pregnancy, is traumatic, can have a profound impact on parents and families. There is a lot for parents to process, grieving the loss of their precious baby, which is often unexplained and unexpected. At the same time, they are honouring their baby, seeking and providing and potentially setting out on a journey, maybe a long one, of healing. There is absolutely no doubt that miscarriage care has seen significant improvements in Scotland, and I welcome the Scottish Government's commitments to ensuring everyone affected by pregnancy loss before 24 weeks gets the high-quality care and support they need. I also welcome that the Scottish Government has mandated the National Bereavement Care Pathway, which has meant that all health boards are currently working on implementing the standards and pathways associated with it. The positive impact is beginning to show for both bereaved parents and healthcare staff. 82% of healthcare professionals agree in that it has helped to raise the profile of effective bereavement care. And while that is positive, there is work still to be done. For instance, in the SANS briefing we received, and I'd like to thank them and everyone else, Presiding Officer, who took the trouble to get in touch with us before the debate, they said they've heard of examples of significant delays between women being seen in A&E for a suspected miscarriage and then waiting up to 3 days for referral to early pregnancy assessment services. Health boards must consider what work they can do to reduce these delays and offer more direct access to early pregnancy assessment services. And I'd be interested to hear from the Minister in her closing speech if an assessment has been made of the adequacy of access to early pregnancy assessment services for all those who need it and what improvements can be made. Presiding Officer, can I take the opportunity to thank the Scottish Government for launching a memorial book and certificate in 2023 for all those who experienced pregnancy or baby loss prior to 24 weeks. For those who have not suffered a loss, it probably does not have a significant meaning. To those that did, it means the world. That their loss of their loved one, no matter how young, matters and is not forgotten. In closing, Presiding Officer, I'd like to finish by expressing my sympathies with all those who have gone through this tragic loss. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Mbarr. We now move to closing speeches. I would advise members that we have, in effect, used up the additional time in hand that we had earlier on, and I would ask members if they could try to speak to their speaking times. And I call on Gillian Mackay to close on behalf of the Scottish Greens. Up to 4 minutes, please.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. Today's debate has highlighted the progress we've made in Scotland, but also underscored the urgent need to continue improving miscarriage care. We've heard powerful contributions from colleagues, and I wanted to thank those who have shared their personal testimony. It's hugely powerful, and I have a massive amount of respect for those who have done so. I, like Monica Lennon, haven't experienced the horror and sincerely hope we never do, but I want to thank the campaigners that have been mentioned for the change that they've made. One of the gaps we need to address is absolutely how employers treat miscarriage in particular. We should be making that sort of support consistent for everyone. Some employers may provide sick leave or bereavement leave, but very few provide dedicated miscarriage leave that accurately reflects the physical and psychological trauma that women go through. There are some employers that are doing the right thing, but it's not a guarantee, and we should be pushing for standardised miscarriage leave based on what women need to recover properly. I wanted to add my voice to Brian Whittle's ask around making sure that stillborn babies have the opportunity to have a birth certificate. It's hugely important for some in their grief journey that there's an official acknowledgement that their baby was here. I think we've recognised that through the Memorial Book of Pregnancy and Baby Loss, and I think this is another logical step. Bob Doris's speech was hugely powerful, and I think his reflections on the chaos around miscarriage and the ability of families to take in information is really insightful. making sure that people, as with other forms of bereavement, can get support when they're ready, not just in the immediate aftermath of loss, is really important. Psychological support for recurrent miscarriage is a must, both at the time of those miscarriages, but also for those who become pregnant again. The anxiety normally in pregnancy is quite something. I originally wrote early pregnancy there, but miscarriage does cover up to 24 weeks, which for some will be more than halfway through their pregnancy. That anxiety doesn't go away once you get beyond 12 weeks, and for those with recurrent losses, I would really welcome some detail from the government on how we make sure that they're supported properly. I welcome the early scan provision in the framework, and this, along with other enhanced physical measures, are very welcome. But we need to make sure that mum stays well with appropriate mental wellbeing support. Providing that early contact of a scan before 12 weeks really means that people can build those relationships between patients and midwives, which are invaluable. Beyond 8 weeks, many women around Scotland will have access to their notes through the Badger Notes app. For those who may not have seen it, it provides women with the ability to see their blood test results, among other resources relevant to pregnancy. I apologise if this is anywhere in the framework because I haven't managed to make my way through it fully yet, but I wonder if government has given any consideration to what that app can do to help support those who either have had recurrent miscarriages or those going through a miscarriage. The app also lists all of your previous pregnancies, and I'd be grateful to know if the Minister has considered whether those with a history of previous miscarriages should be able to ask for those pregnancies to not appear in that app. These reflections reinforce the importance of ensuring that every woman and family affected by pregnancy loss receives compassionate and high-quality care. The delivery framework for miscarriage care represents a crucial opportunity to establish consistent, dignified and compassionate care for all. However, it will only be effective if we continue to push for real, tangible change, ensuring that improved data collection, expanded specialist services and stronger psychological support become a reality, not just an ambition. We must also continue to listen to the voices of those with lived experience. Their insights should shape our policies and the delivery of our services. Work across government, our healthcare system and support organisations will continue to make a real difference to the lives of so many.
Thank you, Ms Mackay. I now call on Cara Mocking to close on behalf of Scottish Labour. Up to 4 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. And can I start by thanking everyone in the Chamber for their contribution in this crucial debate. I really believe we can have constructive debates to push change where we can get some agreement. But I think it is important to acknowledge, as Member Sue Webber did, where we do need to push further. And I think we all understand that things can be delayed, but it is our responsibility in opposition to highlight these areas. I want to also mention that I think some of the cross-party work that has been spoken about here is really so important. And Monica Lennon mentioned the work that she did with Tess White on the PLGT test for stillbirth, and I think that was thoroughly worthwhile, and I thank them for doing that. And it shows how the Parliament can work at its best with government. I also want to mention Jackie Dunbar's words when she talked about just being there. I think it is an important part of what we are discussing today, that people do need that level of support from family and friends, and it is our responsibility to make sure that that is part of the framework, that we can support that. I'm also very keen to make sure that I mention Brian Whittle, Phil McGregor, Bob Doris, who really took the point about breaking down stigma so well and shared their stories, and I think everybody in the Chamber do appreciate that. And if I can just speak a bit to Douglas Ross's suggestion about a further meeting, I think that is a really important part of what you tried to speak about, Minister, in terms of that. Going forward, we can work together, but we do need to have space in the Parliament to do that. So I think Douglas Ross and myself are really keen that you move forward with that suggestion that you made earlier. Can I just also speak a wee bit about, and I'll allow Monica Lennon and Beatrice Wishart to decide which person owns the constituent, but Louise Caldwell's contribution to this, I think, cannot be understated. And that what it shows is that campaigning by people in their communities can really have an effect on us here in the Scottish Parliament, and it can move mountains and make such differences to people. And we know now, there's no denying the crucial work there is in terms of having these spaces for people who experience pregnancy loss in order that they can recover and can have that care and support that they so desperately need. We did have an important point raised about funding and the tailored support and training and how the funding has to follow that so that we can actually get those tangible outcomes for people. So I'm sure that the Minister will understand that we will be looking at that within the framework as we go through it now that it has been produced. The important points around that graded model of care, I think we all agree with, and that provides a comprehensive pathway. And as we go through the document, we will be able to, I'm sure, pull those individual bits out. The inconsistencies within health boards, we know that from the report before the scoping exercise that you did. And so I'm hoping, having had a brief look at the papers, that we will have that to make sure that we have outcomes that we can identify. And of course, Gillian Mackay spoke very well in her opening speech about the additional organisations that we know do such great work within the NHS, and the one that springs to mind is the SANS in her area. So in conclusion, I think we do all need to work together, and I thank the Scottish Government for bringing this debate today, and I hope that we can move it forward in a way that makes sure that people get the best outcomes in this area of care. Thank you, President.
Thank you, Ms Mockin. And I call on Rachel Hamilton to close on behalf of the Scottish Conservatives. Up to 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. I think today's debate has been very valuable. I want to give the Government another rap over the hand, though, for not delivering the framework for us to read prior to the debate, because I think that would have happened. But I think they've taken that on board, Presiding Officer, and I think it's probably a lesson to learn in such an emotive debate. I also want to thank Louise Caldwell for she's award-winning, I believe, as Monica Lennon has said, and for her continuing campaigning and petitioning, and the rest of the people in the gallery. But also I'd like to thank the men in the room. I thought they delivered really good speeches today. Fulton McGregor, Brian Whittle, Bob Doris and Douglas Ross. And it's important that we remember partners in this whole process. I particularly thought Bob Doris's speech was very good, because it, for the first time ever, Presiding Officer, I felt confident today, 15 years later, to talk about a 12-week miscarriage that I had experienced. I received incredible care at the Borders Hospital, at the BGH, as we call it. They didn't have specific separate rooms. You know, the gynaecologist, the nursing staff were very caring and compassionate. I had access to a quiet room, although it was in an area where there were heavily pregnant women. Like Bob, I was caught up in the chaos of this sort of news, and they did the best that they could. And I didn't really understand what was going on around me. But I think for me, what hasn't been mentioned today was the whole process. So you have to take a lot of information on board about what will happen next and the surgical procedure. But beyond that, many people today have talked so knowledgeably about the aftermath of everything. So I remember specifically not telling anybody other than my very close family, and then they all decided that I should go to a family wedding. So I felt different. I had a kind of the hormones, the emotions, the coping with the changes, the recovery from a surgical procedure, and I just didn't want to talk about it. And I thought it was so clever that Gillian Mackay and Rona and Douglas Ross and others talked about, and Sue talked about the taboo. It was about the stigma. I wasn't able to talk about it, Presiding Officer. I was not ready, and I probably haven't been ready until this day. And when I got offered the opportunity to speak about miscarriage, I thought, yes, I'm ready now. And that's 15 years later. So you can imagine how raw it feels for so many other people. And I think Brian Whittle and other members, Carol Mochan, talk about the mental health aspects and the support and the training of the workforce for the healthcare professionals. I really think that is so important. And also about ensuring that we have these services that are not that are accessible everywhere, including rural areas. And I know the Minister is from a rural area, so she gets these rural issues. It shouldn't be a postcode lottery. But as I say, I didn't feel as though I was being discriminated against because I didn't have a separate space, because my mind and my headspace didn't kind of register that. But now looking back, I think it is important, particularly for women who have multiple miscarriages and who have trouble conceiving. It must be so re-traumatising to go back through that. So I think there is an important framework that we are looking at to understand where these separate spaces are not offered, to gather the data that allows the Scottish Government to deliver on their promises. I do, Minister, if I'm being frank, think that the time frame as set out by my colleague Sue Webber is going to be quite challenging for you, because there are reasons that NHS boards don't offer separate spaces, mental health support, workforce support. But I suppose our ambition is that everyone can get access to deal with grieving, loss and those private spaces. Brian Whittle talked about miscarriage not just being a medical event. It is a long-term emotional and psychological event. And I think it is important that we recognise that, as Jean Turner, the Executive Director of Scotland's Patients Association, stressed, that psychological support can be as much of a priority as physical care for women who are experiencing miscarriage. One of the things I wanted to highlight was that when I was looking into this debate, was that, again, going back to the rural access, as many of you know, that I live in and work in a rural area, represent people from a rural area. But looking at Caithness, more than 90% of women are forced to travel 210 miles for a round trip to Inverness to access maternity services, and also in Dumfries and Galloway, women travel 70 miles due to the maternity services being centralised. As others have said, I haven't had time to read the report today, but I'm hoping that it's going to address some of those issues that women travelling are having. So there are a number of areas that I do believe are really important. I just want to summarise them. Consistent provision, separate spaces, better mental health and bereavement support, improved access to treatment in every region, and better data collection, if I haven't already said that. But thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms Hamilton. And I now call on Minister Jenny Minto to wind up on behalf of the Scottish Government. And if the Minister could take us to 5 o'clock, that would be grand. Thank you.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The debate this afternoon has again highlighted how vitally important it is to prioritise the healthcare needs of women, and I would like to thank every single member who shared their personal miscarriage or stillbirth stories this afternoon, and also those who have shared their constituents' journeys. I've spoken to Monica Lennon about this before, and it is an absolute privilege to listen to your constituents, to understand how you can make a difference. And speaking very personally, one of my own constituents came to me and explained the situation that she ended up in, having to travel and then into a hospital where she was in the same space as women that were about to give birth, and the impact that that had on her, but also her partner. And that has stuck with me, and that has been my leading light, like I know with regards to Monica Lennon and also Beatrice Wishart, Louise Caldwell has been for them. it is a privilege when you get to hear stories like that and know that you can try to make a difference. And I hope the work, and I believe the work that we have been doing to improve miscarriage support in Scotland is going to move in that direction. So I thank everybody in the Chamber for the tone of this debate and also raising the points that they have. Brian Whittle and others raised mental health, and I touched on meetings that I've had with Held in Our Hearts and the help at home that they provide, not only here in Lothian, but also in NHS Highland. So they have a recognition and an understanding that women need support and families need support at the appropriate time for them. And the women that I met who had received that support were clear that the personal phone call that they got from Held in Their Hearts, staff or volunteers, really helped their mental health and well-being. And also, if coming to terms is the right phrase to use, their ability to find a path through their baby loss. And that's why I was very pleased to be able to agree funding for them in this current financial year, but also the next financial year as well. Bob Doris and Fulton McGregor both referenced Shona Robinson's debate a couple of years ago in this Parliament. And reading the transcript of that, I was struck very much by the common use of the word stigma. And I was very pleased to hear, and I agree with Rachel Hamilton, the men in this chamber today have really shown their compassion and their understanding of a situation, and the fact that they have been able to talk about the situations that they've either personally experienced or recognise from their constituents. That is incredibly important. So I thank you very much for that. Douglas Ross, your comment or the quote that you gave, you are the midwife I didn't want to meet, but I'm so pleased I did. I'm fairly sure I heard that story when I was at Dr. Gray's, and I think that shows the compassion that we need from all our healthcare staff, and I hope that the framework that we have released today gives health boards that structure to be able to ensure that the support is there for their staff. Yes, of course.
Monica Lennon.
I'm grateful to the Minister. I agree. I think the antidote to stigma is compassion and love and care. But to get that trauma-informed approach, it doesn't happen, by chance. So I've had a look at the framework. I'm really pleased that trauma-informed support is mentioned throughout. But how can the Minister reassure the Parliament that there will be that investment in training and education, not just for the workforce in our maternity wards, but primary care as well? And I think to make sure we reach workplaces and homes and communities like others have mentioned.
Minister.
I thank Monica Lennon for her intervention there, and I was just going to move on to the fact that we have, as I said earlier, I'm delighted to announce that the Scottish Government has agreed to funding of £1.5 million to support this miscarriage care. I would like to go further. I'm still arguing to go further, but I'm so pleased that I've got that £1.5 million that we can allocate as appropriate. And we will ask NHS boards to assess what their service is delivering now, and then also how we can progress. So there is very close work happening between my officials and NHS boards. And I think that that's I think, one of the conversations that we may have at a future meeting with officials, and I hope as well Professor Justine, can't remember her surname, our midwife as well, around the table. Bob Doris raised the point about research, and the Scottish Government works very closely with Tommies, who are leaders in miscarriage research, and we meet regularly with them. And these discussions include ongoing research and trials, and also the Chief Scientist within the Scottish Government supports and increases the level of high-quality research that we can have in Scotland. So these are other ways that we are looking at how we can improve knowledge across Scotland and perhaps some solutions. Yes, of course.
Brian Whittle.
Very, very grateful for the Minister giving way. One of the things that strikes me that wasn't really discussed much during the debate was that post-miscarriage, especially ectopic pregnancy, there can be a significant impact on fertility. Now, is there a way in which we can make sure that both those elements in terms of the physical impact of fertility can be linked to IVF? How do we make that part of the process?
Minister. I thank Brian Whittle for that question, and it's quite a wide-ranging one, and I recognise exactly the point that you have made with regards to fertility and ectopic pregnancy, and there is a pathway, a framework for that just now, but very happy to look and get more information and respond back to the member. I'm so pleased that Beatrice Wisher talked about the Northern Star ward in NHS Shetland, Gilbert Bain, and I hope that the star that is, other health boards can review and see how they can maybe not match that standard, but work towards matching that standard. So thank you very much. Very grateful for everyone today for their input on this important debate. And I'm also very grateful for the hard work that the chairs of the working groups have completed, their leadership and their time that they have given to ensure that the framework for miscarriage care in Scotland and the progesterone pathway are as strong as they can be. These will make a difference to the lives of women who go through miscarriage and threatened miscarriage in future. And I'm also deeply grateful to the professionals who take care of women and their families every day in Scotland following a miscarriage. That includes the professionals who break bad news, the staff who take care of women following their confirmed miscarriage, and third sector organisations who then look after women and their families. I also want to thank those with lived experience who have fought so hard to bring about the change. And I'd like to thank everybody in the Chamber for their contributions today and look forward to continuing this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. That concludes the debate on improving miscarriage care. There will be a very short pause before we move on to the next item of business. Thank you.